This is the day. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord has made. So let us rejoice. Let us rejoice. Let us rejoice and be glad.
Reading from the Message by Eugene Peterson, Luke 13, 10-17. Jesus was teaching in one of the meeting places on the Sabbath. There was a woman present, so twisted and bent over with arthritis that she couldn't even look up. She had been afflicted with this for 18 years. When Jesus saw her, he called her over. "Woman, you're free." He laid hands on her, and suddenly she was standing straight and tall, giving glory to God. The meeting place president, furious because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the congregation, "6 days have been defined as work days. Come on one of the 6 if you want to be healed, but not on the 7th, on the Sabbath." But Jesus shot back, "You frauds! Each Sabbath, each one of you regularly unties your cow or donkey from its stall, leads it out to water, and thinks nothing of it. So why isn't it all right for me to untie this daughter of Abraham and lead her from the stall where Satan has had her tied for these 18 years?" When he put it that way, his critics were left looking quite silly and red-faced. The congregation was delighted and cheered him on.
That Sabbath day, as always, she went to the synagogue and took her place assigned her, right behind the grill where the elders had concurred. She would block no one's view. She could lean her heavy head, and though this was never said, she'd give a good example to the ones who stood behind her. That day, intent as always on the word, for 18 years she'd listened thus. She heard authority when Jesus spoke. Though long stripped of forwardness, she came forward nonetheless when Jesus summoned her. "Woman, you are free of your infirmity," he said. The leader of the synagogue worked himself into a sweat as he tried to bend the Sabbath and the woman back into place. But she stood up straight and let God's glory touch her face.
From the setting described in Luke, it seemed like an average Sabbath at an average synagogue with an average congregation in attendance. There was no hint that Jesus anticipated the thoughts of his accusers on this occasion, or that accusation was on the mind of any of those gathered. The bent-over woman apparently went unnoticed until Jesus interrupted the service and announced her presence in the synagogue. It was in the interruptive act of calling and speaking to her that this unnamed woman could no longer be ignored. Had it not been for the unexpected action Jesus initiated toward the woman, this would have remained just another average Jewish Sabbath, not worthy of mention in the Bible. With no words of explanation, Jesus stopped in the middle of his teaching and called the woman. He spoke to her and proclaimed her freedom. And before anything else occurred, he touched the woman and healed her. The woman immediately stood upright and straight, and she praised God. Then it happened.
Jesus and his adversary exchanged words in a heated verbal battle. The official released his fury and told the people that healing was not allowed on the Sabbath. Healing was like any other work, which was to be done and finished in 6 days. Jesus rebuked the synagogue ruler after the healing, and this rebuke was in some of the strongest language found anywhere in the scriptures. You hypocrites was what Jesus called him and his followers. The ruler's own words and behavior were the source of shame that silenced him, for they served to make Jesus' teaching even more powerful and his words of judgment more strong.
The healing of the bent-over woman was not a private event. After the public rebuke of the synagogue ruler by Jesus, the entire congregation got involved. This healing was a community affair. Everyone experienced empowerment. They all rejoiced at the glorious things that were done by Jesus. In a sense, they were all set free from the bondage of a tradition that placed more importance on keeping the law than on responding to the welfare and needs of human beings. When the bent-over woman was healed, they all stood straighter. Indeed, no healing is without its positive social side effects for the entire community.
Jesus felt no need to justify healing the infirm woman, nor his actions on the Sabbath. Instead, Jesus was compelled to confront an unjust institution and its laws that kept this woman in bondage, bent over and unfree. By his words and actions, Jesus indicated that there was no lasting health and wholeness until unjust leaders and institutions become just and equitable.
But what of today? Do we observe the Sabbath or simply ignore it? Do we know the purpose or reasons for the fourth commandment given on Mount Sinai? Recall what is written in Exodus 20, 8 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. There the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it.
Hear these words from Joan Chittister. One of the cardinal sins of the recent past may well be the loss of Sabbath. The concept of Sabbath escapes the modern mind, despite the fact that the idea of Sabbath is the oldest in the Judeo-Christian tradition. It is in a culture of cars and planes, of 24-hour-a-day shopping malls and 7-day-a-week services, the lost art of the present. Scholars of the Talmud tell us that the reason God created Sabbath was not because God needed rest, but in order to model rest, to sanctify rest, to demand rest of us, so that by regularly resting in God, we could ourselves become new people. Sabbath, the tradition says, crowns life with 4 dimensions. First, thanks to the Sabbath, everyone in society is equal at least 1 day a week. On the Sabbath, both rich and poor have the right to live a privileged life, exempt from drudgery. Second, Sabbath makes the whole world free. The upper class puts down its burden of administration. The lower class, the slaves, live free from the demand to take orders. The third gift of Sabbath, the rabbis teach us, is the foretaste of heaven that comes with resting in God, refreshing family life and internalizing the word that nourishes our souls for the rest of the week. The fourth blessing of the Sabbath comes from taking the time to consider the purpose of life, to determine if we can say with the Creator about our own work in the world, that's good. Sabbath, in other words, is meant to enrich life, to measure life, to bring reflection to life, to engender life with soul. Sabbath should be those time-out days when we allow ourselves to look at life in fresh and penetrating ways. Sabbath calls us to worship what deserves to be worshiped and to dismiss from the center of our souls what does not.
Our noisy day has now descended with sun beyond our sight. In the silence of our praying place, we close the door upon the hectic joys and fears, the accomplishments and anguish of the week we have left behind. What was but moments ago the substance of our life has become memory. What we did must now be woven into what we are. On this day, we shall not do, but be. We are to walk the path of our humanity, no longer ride unseeing through a world we do not touch and only vaguely sense. No longer can we tear the world apart to make our fire. On this day, heat and warmth and light must come from deep within ourselves.
Sabbath is the true God's gift to those who wish to rest and to be free, and who are willing to guard the same gift for every living thing in their vicinity as well. Remember the commandment. It's not just for you, but for your children, your employees, your volunteer helpers, your animals and fields, your migrant workers. Anyone who engages this practice discovers the saving habits of work and rest that promise life not only for each of us individually, but also for our families, our communities, our far-flung neighbors, our systems of justice, our human economies, and our planet.
Behind the bars of broken hearts, of banishment and pain, lives a spirit crying out for freedom from the shame. Long enough is Jesus' cry. Stand up straight with spirit spry. This is the day the Lord hath made. Let love be known and bondage fade.
Even as Jesus brings health and wholeness to a woman created in the image of God, the religious leader turns attention to a legalistic interpretation of the fourth commandment. In his disrespect of Jesus, the leader exposes his own distance from the knowledge of God. Such detractors are alive and well in the 21st century as well.
Sabbath is pure gold. It is not a commandment we are bound to, it's a promise we're invited to. Sabbath rest is an invitation to practice for eternity. It's where we regularly, intentionally engage in God's rule and reign in our hearts and on earth. We have to stop working and truly rest in God's presence. When we practice this intentional stop, we make room for God to take up residence in our individual lives. When we do this together, we're making space for God in our communities.
Sabbath is a marker in time to assert that our time is not our own, and we cannot order our lives 24/7 in order to get ahead in the world. Of course, that's what they had done in the Jerusalem temple, building, busy, aggressive, rendering all of life into buying and selling and trading. And in the middle of it all comes the assertion from Sinai that one must stop work. One must desist from the futile effort to control and get ahead. One must recognize that life does not consist in production and consumption, that our existence is not selling and buying and consuming and having and owning and trading and accumulating. The Sabbath command stands as a marker against our busy anxiety against which Jesus protests.
I'm not quite as tall as Derek, but I think you can hear me. I want to say thanks to all of you who have joined us this evening, both virtually and in person, especially the group here from Heritage in Brentwood. Thank you for being here. They shared a meal with us for our gather at the table, and I hope they got enough to eat, and as well as our regulars that are here. So thank you for being here. And on this Sabbath day, I want to thank our musicians, Kevin Medill at the piano, John Ownby at the bass, and Matt Davish at the woodwinds, and our tech team, Kim Joyce and Michael Vaughn, and our readers, LaDonna and Derek Weber. Thank you so much. And I hope you have enjoyed this. You'll notice on the back of your bulletin, there are some announcements coming up. We have Tuesdays in the chapel, 12:30. And Poets Corner this week will be Leslie LaChance. There's an art exhibit on second floor of Lasky, and that bottom message is an important one because we cannot continue to do these programs without your support. So I thank you. So on this message tonight, we hear the bent over woman, and I was thinking about how those gentlemen that were sitting there or the people that were sitting in that Sabbath. This weekend I saw a sign, keep your eyes on Jesus. And I'm thinking that some of the disciples nudged one another, keep your eyes on Jesus and what he's gonna do in healing that woman. And so we need to keep our eyes out and see what Jesus is doing in our world today. Again, I thank you for being here.
Our service this evening started with Jesus interrupting the Sabbath worship to heal a woman. Listen once again to her story in this poem, Liberation Story, by Thomas John Carlyle. I am a woman older than my age, bent and deformed by my paralysis these 18 years, my inability to look another straight in the eyes, my hardest cross. Now, how could Jesus care to notice me or dare to call me over to the more sacred, privileged place allowed to men in any synagogue? And on the Sabbath day, the Sabbath, to heal me with a simple word of freedom, sealed with a touch which might have made him unclean for all he knew. They tried to blame me, though it was worth the change to be thus freed. Their anger was at him for all the rules he cavalierly broke on my behalf, and on behalf of everyone who sees the meaning of the way he treated me. I praise my God for what he did in lifting up my body and my soul, and I shall tell my liberation story, your liberation story, our liberation story, always, always.
Her story has led us to consider the Sabbath once again. Therefore, go with this prayer in your hearts. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. On the Sabbath, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. On the Sabbath, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. On the Sabbath, we are reminded that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. Therefore, we welcome Sabbath, day of rest, day of wonder, day of peace.